Hey everyone, tonight we'll delve into a secret thread woven deep into the marble heart of Rome, a thread that, if tugged, might unravel the empire's entire story. Imagine standing not in a grand forum where senators bicker, nor at the steps of a temple where incense rolls heavenward, but in the silent quarries of stone outside the city. There, under the weight of centuries, stones whisper not with the voices of masons, but with murmurs said to come from the gods themselves. You probably won't want to believe what you are about to hear, because if it's true, then Roman history as we know it was never the work of men at all but of one strange artifact carried through shadows hidden beneath altars and coveted by emperors. So, before the tension gets too high, take a moment to like the episode and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the spirit of keeping this story alive, as more than just words in the dark, post your location and your local time below. I want to know not just who listens, but from which corners of the world you join this circle tonight. Now, close your eyes, imagine the ancient mountains, and let's unravel this epic tale together. You hear the steady crack of a hammer, the dusty scrape of stone being pried from bedrock. The sound carries across Italian hillsides, echoing as though the earth itself wants to remember. And then imagine leaning close. One stone, pale and veined with green shimmer, hums faintly beneath the miner's touch. Not a metaphorical hum, an actual vibration rising from within. It's like flutes and drums played in a cavern where no musician exists. Roman laborers, hardened by sun and war, drop their tools as if the heat has burned through the handles. The rumor spreads. Some call it a trick of fatigue. Others say the stone itself is an omen, the lost relic of Troy, the cradle of Rome's mythic line. You know the old story. Rome's founders, descendants from Aeneas, carrying Trojan fire through exile and into destiny. But what if hidden inside the very bones of Italy, there lay something older than their arrival? Legends in the hills of Lazio tell of an object that was not made in human forges. Farmers whispered of metals that glowed when touched by moonlight, of carved inscriptions that rearranged themselves depending on who stared at them too long. Could a relic like this truly exist? Or was it only the fear of peasants, retold to weary legionaries around campfires? The question that remained was far stranger. Why would the empire's rising leaders quietly send envoys to retrieve the stone without fanfare, without record, without inscription? Picture Rome in its age of expansion. Roads gash through forests like veins stretched across the earth. Aqueducts march in solemn cadence toward the city. Senators argue in basilicas about harvest and glory. And yet, in the quiet, men cloak themselves against recognition, escorting a wagon drawn not to war but to secrecy. No heralds announce its passing. No reports are filed in marble ledgers. It is as though the empire itself already knew this object belonged outside the reach of history and within the reach of myth. Yet myths always leave a signature. One soldier, dismissed for drunkenness, claimed he heard the sound of voices inside the stone as it passed under Rome's gates. Another spoke only once of the artifact before clawing his eyes in madness, muttering that he had seen the faces inside. What was it that shimmered beneath Roman skies? Too sacred for priests? Too dangerous for poets? Too coveted for emperors? And why, in the centuries that followed, did it appear only in moments of crisis, when Rome teetered between collapse and triumph? And as the first emperor of Rome soon learns, sometimes the earth conceals not treasure, but trials delivered by forces far beyond the hearth of mankind. The question that remained was this: if Rome was guided not solely by men, but by something inside that whispering stone, whose hand truly shaped history, the general first appears in silence, a man of discipline, a commander whose sleep betrays him with visions no Roman stratagem could map. You were there beside him, in a dim tent along the Danube frontier, the canvas walls shuddering with the moan of the wind. In restless slumber he sees not his legions, not the restless tribes across the river, but an empty chamber filled with pulsing light. He hears a voice not, a voice of Latin cadence, nor Greek chants, but a chorus that bridges both, as if sliding between known tongues like water slipping through a soldier's cupped hands. The artifact stands at the center of his dream, taller than a man's chest, shaped less like a weapon and more like an object of worship. Its surface shimmers, sometimes polished obsidian, sometimes metal that cannot tarnish. It breathes, it watches, He wakes with the sweat of terror streaking across his back, feeling though he does not say aloud that the gods had just drafted him into their own councils. When dawn rises, Rome demands control of its soldiers' faith. And yet, in the general's eyes, a betrayal simmers. For what does loyalty mean, if Jupiter himself places a different standard in the mind of an ordinary man than the Senate decrees? Imagine the conflict. An officer, decorated by campaigns, suddenly unable to separate leadership from prophecy, unable to distinguish a campaign objective from the vision of an object that speaks in riddles. If you were him, would you dismiss the prophecy as dream matter, or would you follow where it pointed? He does not speak first to his men only, to one companion, a young tribune from a noble family. Together they pore over maps by torchlight. The lines of rivers and fortresses blur into symbols. One rune appears again and again. The same one carved supposedly on a stone discovered in Lazio, the same symbol the farmers once chiseled from faint scratches, swore was proof of gods among rock. The general cannot shake it. Why would his dream draw the very shape that common superstitions muttered about in whispers? Out beyond his command tent, the forest offers its own testimony. You hear owls call at noon where no light filters down, wolves circling silently without hunger, as though waiting for an event still approaching. New recruits throw dice in corners, but the dice land in patterns like letters of an unfamiliar alphabet. A soldier spends 3 days claiming he hears something humming inside his own helmet, and when stripped, the noise ceases, as if retreating back to some source greater than iron. The general knows he cannot excuse coincidence forever. In Rome, dreams have weight. Cicero recorded them, oracles interpreted them, and the common man consulted them before planting seeds or setting sail. To dismiss such visions as nothing would be to reject a part of Roman identity itself. And so, the general chooses belief, however dangerous belief might be for an empire ruled by calculation and law. His vision becomes order, his nightmare becomes plan. He sends scouts southward, unmarked by insignia, hunting for a shrine spoken of in both Latin memory. In Greek fragments, a place where mountain and earth protect something more enduring than armies. But if the gods truly spoke, which gods were they? Rome's pantheon was vast and ravenous, borrowing cults from every people it conquered. This voice he heard, this pulsing echo in his skull, did not sound like Jupiter-esque thunder nor Apollo-esque song. It was older, hungrier, more elusive. Could it be a Trojan echo, the surviving whisper of gods long erased except by poets? Or could it be an entirely different deity, one Rome dared not name because recognition itself would enthrone it again? His men could sense his growing obsession. He began carrying wax tablets filled not with military reports, but with sketches of the object as it appeared in his dreams. The engravings changed daily. One morning a cube of dark stone, another day a pillar studded with eyes. Soldiers asked no questions, but whispered in disbelief. Was their commander still theirs, or claimed by something else? A single act would seal his fate. During an evening assembly, he described what he had seen, not openly but masked, translated into the language of battle. He told them they would march south, not because politics demanded it, but because the gods had shown him a standard of victory carved in stone, hidden from men. Some nodded in acceptance, for Rome had always followed omens. Others murmured, "Ease was this yet another cult sprouting under the eagle, a rival to the authority of emperor and senate alike? Picture yourself among them, boots thick with mud, hearing your leader speak not of enemy tribes but of some strange object that might carry Rome's destiny. Would you march? Or would you whisper rebellion in the dark, suspecting the commander no longer fought for Rome, but for something unspeakable breathing through the marrow of a dream?"
Ow.
The dream never faded. Each night, the artifacts summoned him back, demanding his loyalty not as a soldier of Rome, but almost as a priest of something unsanctioned. And each dawn he woke with the same question, trembling at the heart of his command. If history truly bowed to this relic-esque voice, then what place was left for man's own will? But the question that remained was this: was the general's vision prophecy? Or was it a snare whispered into mortal minds by forces that never once had Rome's glory in mind? Blood, lineage, and empire often braided together in ancient Rome like strands of bound laurel. Imagine you were in a lavish atrium, the air blended with the sweetness of olive oil lamps and the sharp tips of bronze coins rubbed endlessly between anxious fingers. Men and women of noble families whisper in this place, not of politics, not of marriage alliances, but of a story older than the Capitol Hill itself. The rumor presses close against your ear. The artifact the general dreamed of may not have been Roman in origin at all. The whispers pointed to Troy. Not the Troy sung by Homer, where heroes fell beneath the weight of Achilles' wrath, but a Troy after ruin where scraps of the city's sacred objects slipped away with refugees. Romans believed their bloodline flowed directly from that exodus, carried by Aeneas across the seas, protected by Venus, destined for glory. Could a certain relic, hidden in silence for generations, have fled with them? A noblewoman traces the genealogy on the mosaic of her courtyard floor, seeing not just her ancestors, but shadows of hidden burdens. Some claim the object was carried in the hollowed hull of a burned ship, preserved with oils, buried beneath earth of Italy until Rome itself grew strong enough to bear its power. It was not merely a relic, it was an inheritance. Those in power obsessed with legitimacy. Augustus himself tied his name to Venus and Troy to sanctify his reign. To say a relic from Trojan survivors endured beneath Roman hills was to wield control over a story that gave Rome its divine mandate. And so, those who whispered of it did not do so for amusement. They did so because whoever held it might control Rome. It's very mythology. If you think of it now, in an empire built as much on imagination as on conquest, mythology was sharper than any sword. But the genealogy carried a darker undercurrent. Some houses avoided discussing the tale entirely. A senator once blinded by fever insisted he had seen youth from his own line touched by the artifact only to wither within a week, his skin tightening like old parchment. Families hid those born with strange marks, claiming it the will of gods, but muttering more privately that no union with the artifact produced blessing. It produced curse. The object's supposed connection to Trojan ancestry gave it currency with Rome's rulers. But an opposite dread in private households. A mother in Alba Longa was said to forbid her children from playing near old shrines, fearing that brushing against the stone might awaken blood they carried in secret. Slaves told night stories of noble infants who cried when full moons shone, as though reacting to light refracted through a relic long buried. And children grew to men, carrying the weight of a rumor never verified, yet never silenced. And if you belonged to such a family, wouldn't you wonder every time a storm cut across the city whether thunder struck your house more loudly than others? Wouldn't you feel the eyes of forgotten gods upon you, thanking you or cursing you for bringing their artifact across generations? That is the strangeness of Rome. Blood meant both inheritance and burden.
Ow.
The artifact was whispered to favor certain lines, to recognize descendants of Aeneas. One household reported that whenever a particular son entered the temple where faint carvings survived, the stone glowed green. Another claimed its family could not stay in its presence, collapsing as though lungs failed, like swimmers drowned in invisible seas. Such stories only deepened the divide. Was the object blessing or curse? Trojan fire reborn, or Trojan ashes preserved? And more sinister if the relic carried Trojan destiny within it, what did its silence mean for Rome? Had it been waiting, like an ember, buried too deep, for someone reckless enough to breathe it back into flame? Rome thrived on conquest, but conquest was never enough. Control of a narrative-decided legacy. To claim the artifact as Trojan would mean rewriting Rome not as mere conqueror of the Mediterranean, but as inheritor of the gods' unfinished work. Families who saw advantage in that whispered carefully to emperors, planting seeds of obsession. Families who saw danger buried it deeper, until secrecy itself became an heirloom. Yet no family could escape the central question. At their triumphal banquets while feasting before laurel-crowned statues, their thoughts returned again and again to the same haunting suspicion. If Rome's greatest leaders came from Trojan exile, then was their empire free, or was it merely the continuation of a war begun in Troy? A war guided by an object that refused to vanish. And so the question that remained was this: if the artifact truly carried Trojan destiny into Roman veins, then who really ruled men across marble floors? Or gods whispering still from shadows of forgotten bloodlines? The hills of Lazio, cradled their secrets the way old oaks cradled hidden springs silently, held jealously, waiting for the right ears. You walk there by moonlight, along ridges where sheep bleat faintly in the distance, and tumbling stones break the monotony of silence. The villagers avoid these paths after darkness. They claim the shrines built under the hills, breathe faint warm air, as though an invisible heart beats inside. Rome, with its temples of grandeur, might sneer at these rustic stories. But for those raised among the hills, the whispers persist. Something below was not meant for mortal eyes. Imagine you're guided with only a torch. The path leads you downward, past crumbling arches, into a chamber hidden since the age of Etruscans. The walls flicker with carving spirals, lightning bolts, a winged stag leaping between stars. None are entirely Roman, yet some symbols echo Greek legend, while others belong to no alphabet known. The shrine sits there, a shallow pedestal cut of volcanic stone, empty now, but clearly designed to hold something heavy, something precious. The very air of the chamber weighs thicker than above, as though you inhale not just air but presence. Your torchlight bends oddly at the pedestals, adjusted the stone warp physics itself, or is it only your trembling nerves? This is not a temple of worship in usual sense. No benches, no offering bowls. This is a vault, a keeping place. Ancient farmers muttered these were sacra nan scriptin written sacred things. They swore strange animals lingered at the sites, black dogs whose gaze pinned men to the soil, birds shrieking in unison without moving wings. Etruscan priests, long before Rome's rise, whispered of a relic that could blur lines between gods and men. Some argued gods left it behind as a gesture of trust. Others, more fearful, believed the gods abandoned it because they too knew mortals could not wield its power. In Rome's early rulers, they built shrines around such sites, not within. Think carefully about that. The city accepted the hills as holy, yet never dared drag the relic into its heart. Why? Power or fear? Perhaps both. As you run your fingers across the carvings, imagine what senators debated centuries later. Why do both Greek and Etruscan imagery entwine here? A fragment of myth describes a Mycenaean warrior who crossed the sea after the fall of Troy, bearing treasures for trade, but one treasure shattered his mind. He settled not in glory, but in madness, his household consumed until the villagers threw the object into the ground. Centuries later, the Etruscans raised stones above it. Then, Romans stumbled upon it, inheritors not by choice, but by sheer accident of geography. The shrine stands as a threshold. Listen closely in certain accounts. Visitors claim to hear dripping, though no water ran, metallic chimes, though no bells were hung. Was it the artifact moving within its pedestal? Was it stone echoing memory, repeating vibrations left centuries earlier? Imagine Rome discovering this site while still young, before emperors, before legions filled every horizon. What would you do with such knowledge if revealed in your lifetime? Would you cloak it in secrecy, fearing unrest, or declare it as proof of divine favor, gambling that gods would strike down any doubt against you? History speaks through silence too. The shrine in Lazio was never destroyed. Earthquakes collapsed villages, civil wars raged, fires devoured cities, but still, even now, fragments of its steps remain, resisting ruin. Why does time preserve this one place? Some whispered. Because the artifact never wished to leave. And the rumor passed on that those who lingered too long in the shrine saw blood trickle from carved designs, veins opening in stone as though carved creatures turned momentarily alive. A hunter claimed he saw the stag blink, but he never set foot inside again, and his grandchildren cursed the day he dared speak aloud what he'd secretly seen. From mountain to marble, from Etruscan symbols to Roman destiny, the strange chamber still waits. Empty perhaps, or emptiness only as trick. For if it once held an artifact beyond description, buried under Lazio stones, then who moved it? And why would men risk removing what gods themselves may have sealed away? The question that remained was more ominous. If the shrine was not built for worship, but only for containment, what exactly was Rome trying to contain? Augustus, first among emperors, loved to clothe his power in divine fabric. Imagine the marble palaces gleaming under noon sun, the smell of incense rising from sacrifices he ordered daily, the chants of priests filling newly restored temples. Every column, every triumphal arch, every verse minted on his coins spoke one single truth, that Augustus was not merely man but chosen guardian of Rome's destiny. And yet behind the spectacles of empire whispers told of an obsession running deeper than public ritual. He had heard the murmur of the strange artifact, not through idle rumor, but through the veins of his own ambition. In a city that judged rule not only by law, but by auspices and omens, could he really afford to ignore an object rumored to carry the gods' very breath? No emperor expects mere marble to secure eternity. Augustus wanted a guarantee, an immortal validation. He ordered secret expeditions into the hills, disguised as routine surveys of sacred groves. Roman priests, disguised as ordinary soldiers, entered the shrine remnants in Lazio. Reports returned of a pedestal still warm to touch, even after centuries untouched by fire. Augustus demanded sketches, inscriptions, but the images returned inconsistent. Some showed a cube-like shape, others a spearhead of impossible design. Always, however, the same strange rune appeared, a spiral breaking into shards, like time itself splintering. Publicly, Augustus performed rituals for Apollo and Mars. Privately, some claimed, he muttered invocations to something unnamed, as though trying to stir a god forgotten even by priests. The emperor's closest circle noticed his gaze shift often toward shadows, as if he half expected a voice to emerge from thin air. Perhaps he was not mad, perhaps he was simply waiting for something more ancient than his reign to answer. The forum filled with rumors. Ordinary Romans spoke of the emperor's hidden flame. Senators whispered that Augustus was studying the Trojan stone. He denied nothing, but neither did he confirm, preferring mystery to denial. Mystery strengthens a ruler's aura. After all, if your emperor might secretly converse with gods no one else remembered, would you dare rebel? But those who touched the rumor more closely carried darker stories. One priest was said to collapse after gazing at markings upon the artifact, speaking riddles in Greek hexameter unknown to him mere hours earlier. Another swore he heard his dead father's voice echoing out of its surface, bidding him to burn the object before empire itself fell into ruin. Augustus did not punish these accounts. On the contrary, he encouraged silence, rewarding those willing to guard their tongues and vanishing those who spoke too freely. Consider how different the Augustus of marble appears from the Augustus in these whispers. Orbers the marble emperor gives laws, orders, harvests, secures peace. The whispered emperor kneels in torchlight before a relic too dangerous to declare, too alluring to abandon. Which one feels truer? What drives a man already hailed as son of a god, adopted by Caesar, blessed with Rome's obedience, to hunger for something more? The artifacts, supposed Trojan lineage, tempted him most. Augustus saw himself not just as Rome's founder-in-law, but as a reborn Aeneas, carrying semen of destiny into Rome's folds. If the object truly originated in Troy, if it truly survived the fires and followed Trojan bloodlines across the sea, then in possessing it, Augustus would not just be Rome's first emperor. He would be the final link in that divine unbroken chain. A ruler not by senate, not by legions, but by fate manifest in stone. One evening, beneath a crimson Roman sky, Augustus is said to have confessed to his physician that he dreamt repeatedly of standing in a chamber filled with shifting light. A voice told him, "You are not the first. You will not be the last." He awoke shaken, repeating the phrase for hours, as though trying to grasp whether it was prophecy or trickery. Now imagine yourself in the sandals of Rome's greatest ruler, having secured peace, armies, wealth, devotion. Wouldn't he the thought gnaw at youth that all of it might mean nothing if the true key to legitimacy lay not in Senate decrees nor legions, but in an object hidden in stone? Would you be emperor, or merely chieftain of shadows until you possessed it? And so Augustus did what Rome's clever rulers did best. He cloaked obsession as ritual, veiled hunger as tradition. He sought to absorb the artifact into his own myth, even if he was never able to fully lay hands upon it. The altar of Augustan peace, the Era Passus, carved with symbols of fertility. In divinities, some scholars whisper that among its vines hides a faint spiral, the same rune drawn on the artifact itself, signature camouflaged, daring the ages to notice. It leaves you wondering, if ever Augustus did glimpse the relic, even once was Rome's golden peace secured by clever reforms, or by an emperor's trembling fear that gods unseen were watching. And the question that remained was clear. Did Augustus rule the relic, or was he merely the relic's first chosen emperor pawn in a game far larger than empire itself? You stand in a chamber, lit only by oil lamps, the air thick with resin smoke that clings to the stone walls like a film of forgotten memory. There, upon a platform laden with draped cloths, rests the artifact itself, or at least the first description of it preserved in whispered recollection. Opposing voices call it by many names: lapis ignatus, the unknown stone; res divina, the divine thing; simply illum. It is though no name could contain its nature. Accounts of its appearance never agree. One soldier wrote that when torches touched its surface, he saw polished obsidian so dark it reflected no man's face, only endless night. Another testified that it shone like hammered bronze, gleaming enough to blind him though no sun streamed in. A third spoke of blue fire rippling beneath its crust, like rivers of lightning frozen inside the stone. And most striking of all, men swore that when two people looked at it side by side, they saw different forms. To one a cube, to another a spearhead, to another still a sphere rolling slightly on its base as though restless. Metalworkers brought secretly to inspect it recoiled with confusion. Its surface was too smooth for chisel, too complex for cast, too strong to be scratched even by hardened steel. Water beat it off it unnaturally, as though repelled, and fire seemed reluctant to near. When touched directly, the skin tingled not with heat but with a vibration, like a faint drum beat inside the veins. Some claimed it made their teeth ache as though a storm were building inside their skull. And there, carved or inlaid, ran inscriptions, Latinese phrases warning of kings and bloodlines, but also words no man could explain. Letters resembling Greek, yet twisted. Shapes like Etruscan strokes, yet incomplete. Some letters rearranged themselves when revisited, as though alive, unwilling to stay captured. One senator, brave enough to sketch them by lamplight, returned later to compare his drawings only to find his own parchment had shifted, lines bent by unseen hands. But perhaps strangest of all was its reaction to human presence. Place it among soldiers, and their dice always fell in repeating patterns. Place it in the temple, and sacred birds once calm shrieked incessantly, refusing to eat. A servant tending lamps near it swore he heard his dead mother calling his name from within its sheen, would never set foot near it again. How do you categorize such an object? Rome had words for weapons, gladius; Pilate had words for divine instruments, fasces, augury rods. But this relic belonged to neither category, forcing Romans to name it only by avoidance. Too divine for human classification, too dangerous for divine classification. In essence, it occupied the tension between mortal and God. Yet even in silence, it had purpose. Remember what you've already heard: the generals who dreamt of it, the noble families tracing ancestry to it, the emperors hungering to brandish it. That shimmering, impossible material was not passive. It called minds to itself, shaped thought with gentle insistence. Rome thought itself master of destiny. But perhaps this artifact was destiny's true spine, drawing empire into its orbit gradually, inexorably. Imagine standing before it yourself. The lamp smolders, shadows quiver. You lean closer, and in its depth you see what? Your own reflection? A future battlefield? Or an unfamiliar sky filled with constellations you do not recognize, perhaps from eras past, or times not yet born? You withdraw, unsettled, sensing that the artifact is less an object than a mirror for what you fear and for what you secretly crave. A puzzle torments. Why did no single description hold? If it were merely metal or stone, then surely all eyes would see the same. But if it were something else, something dimensional, something that shifted based on the soul gazing at it, then perhaps it was not designed to be seen at all. Perhaps it was designed only to be heard, commanded, or dreaded. And this was the dilemma of Rome. How could an empire grounded in rational law and military order accept something that bent perception, toyed with senses, disobeyed the very logic of material? Rome could conquer tribes, nations, seas, but could it conquer an artifact that refused to reveal even its own form? A senator once muttered, after a furtive glimpse, "Hoc non est lapis, Al-Lakuz on Marome. This is not a stone, but a lake of souls. He soon vanished from records. And so the artifact unveiled itself to Rome, shimmering not just with strange impossible material, but with questions as infinite as its forms. Objects you can wield are weapons. Objects you cannot define are cages. Which was this? The question that remained was terrible in its simplicity. Did the artifact reveal itself to mortals, or did it only reveal what it wanted them to see? The room is silent, except for the quivering hiss of burning oil. A figure cloaked in white steps forward, her eyes clouded, her lips trembling. The oracle summoned to speak on behalf of what cannot be contained. You stand at the edge of the chamber, watching not just a woman, but the echo of generations speaking through her veins. The artifact hums near her, pulsing faintly, as though it already knows what she will say. Her voice cracks, then spreads steady and calm. Like water poured into an amphora, beware the thing fashioned before men, given once to gods, and now left to your kind. For in it is the seed of empire, the death of empire. Gasps ripple. Senators lean closer. Soldiers grip their blades. Rome, founded on oracles and auguries, does not take such warnings lightly. Yet Augustus himself, when told these words, half smiles, because warnings are always riddles, and riddles can be bent. He assumes danger can be mastered, just as rivers can be redirected, just as states can be disciplined into order. The oracle, though, is unmoved by power. She speaks in fragments, her words punctuated by sudden silences, as though listening for response from a voice none other can hear. She warns that the artifact will always answer to desire, never to law. Whoever approaches it comes not only with questions, but with hungers. Those hungers become the leash by which the object leads men. One general might ask it for victory and see visions of triumph. Another may ask for knowledge and hear whispers of madness. Both outcomes are true, for the artifact offers only reflection tailored to weakness. A curious detail emerges as her eyes roll upward. She speaks not in Latin alone, but in a broken blend of tongues, Etruscan, early Greek, even syllables of what Judean scribes would later call Babylonian magic. How could a woman, uneducated, outside the rites of her temple, pour languages she had never heard into the ears of senators? Those present whispered, it was not she who spoke at all. It was the object, pressing sounds through her lips. Then, suddenly, silence. She exhales sharply, as though suffocating. Attendants rush forward to hold her steady. The torches flicker without draft, lowering their flames as if some invisible presence presses the chamber down. The oracle, pale and trembling, spurs one last line. The hand that clasps it first becomes Rome. The hand that clasps it last ends Rome. The words chilled the rulers who heard them. Augustus, cloaking disquiet in ceremony, ordered sacrifices to Apollo the very next dawn. But privately, he doubled his pursuit of the relic if Rome's life was tied to its possession. Then he meant to ensure only his hand controlled it. Dreams of empire needed anchors, and if this artifact was promise and punishment, then anchoring it within Augustus's grasp seemed the only option. Yet others heard the oracle differently. Some senators saw her words as curse, argued that the artifact should never touch Roman soil, that it should remain buried, forgotten, denied. Military tribunes, however, saw opportunity, whispering that if their cohort seized it first, they might hold power above even emperors. Envy sharpened its teeth the moment prophecy was spoken, as envy always has. Legionaries who guarded the oracle later claimed she wept through the night, whispering to herself, clawing her arms until her skin bled. In the morning, her body was found cold. The reports record illness, but the guards swore she died only after drawing the warning rune upon the walls with her fingernails, the spiral breaking into shards. Tell me, if you were in that chamber, would you have believed her? Would you have feared the object, or reached for it with desperate hunger? Rome was a city that thrived on power taken, not warnings followed. But beneath the calculated calm of its rulers, the oracle's words lodged like a splinter in the empire's marrow. 'Cause when prophecy lingers, history follows. The artifact had already chosen its role, to tempt Caesar, to test Rome, to prove whether gods or men would hold dominion. And still the riddle resounded in silence. Was the oracle's voice her own? Or the clever manipulations of the artifact itself, speaking lies so men would carry it willingly where it wanted to be. The question that remained tremored in every Roman heart who heard her final words. Did the oracle warn them more, merely hand them the leash of their own undoing? Night deepens, and you find yourself no longer in Rome's crowded forum, but among ruins older still. Greece lies across the waters, yet its echoes bleed constantly into Roman veins. Statues, temples, poems, all reminders that Rome stole not only land but myth. And so it is no coincidence that whispers began to tie the relic not merely to Trojan lineage, but to a god from Greece's earliest memory, one so ancient, even Greeks scarcely remembered his name. You walk among broken columns of a Mycenaean ruin, the stones warmed by centuries of sun, silent but humming with absence. Local shepherds tell you of altars buried beneath collapsed walls, offerings not of wine or olive but blood poured into channels carved across rock. The remnants of inscriptions hint not at Zeus, not at Apollo, not even at Hades, but at a figure long buried in cultural amnesia, a nameless deity of thresholds, of crossings between human and divine, a god who dwelled wherever boundaries blurred between life and death, between dream and waking, between truth and illusion. The Mycenaean fragment scraps of him etched in spirals bear symbols uncannily similar to what Rome's artifact carried. That same spiral breaking into shards appears here, centuries before Rome's founding. Greeks of later ages dismissed them as meaningless motifs, but those attentive to patterns Roman priests, copying and comparing records, saw it too often repeated to be chance. Imagine the fear when whispers emerged. This was no Roman stone, no Trojan treasure. It was a Mycenaean heirloom, already old when Homer's verses were young, which raises the darker implication. Aeneas may not have carried it knowingly from Troy. Troy itself may only have been another brief custodian of something far older, transferred through conquest, like a torch too heavy to bear. Greek tales, hushed and fragmented, confirm glimpses of such an object. One fragment speaks of a king who prayed for invulnerability and instead watched his city fall from within. Another poem, half erased, insists the relic was not gift but punishment, given to show mortals how little separation remained between their hunger and their ruin. Was this the hand of forgotten gods? Or perhaps the hand of one deity alone, erased because to remember him would be to remember humanity's weakest mirror? The Romans, ever practical, ever skeptical, nonetheless listened in private chambers to these Greek fragments, and in the quiet, something shifted in their pride. If Rome's destiny lay not in the Senate's decrees, nor Jupiter's thunder, but in a god far older, one who refused temples, how should they rule? What did it mean to admit that behind the shine of familiar gods lay stranger forces that had never stopped moving men like pawns upon a board? The cults in Rome, small but persistent, seized the idea quickly. Statues of Greek origin were repainted, given new names. In the shadows, initiates whispered not to Jupiter or Mars, but to he who cannot be named, the Lord of Crossings. They believed the artifact belonged to him. They believed Rome's recent victories were his reward, but warned that failure to honor him would lead to calamity. A curious story spread among philosophers that when Socrates spoke of a voice within him, it was in truth the same presence. Emanating from this artifact, the whispering deity of thresholds, guiding thought, forbidding speech, prodding choice, a Stoic senator in Rome, eager to bind logic with superstition, wrote that perhaps the artifact was not a god at all, but the very embodiment of fatum fate itself condensed into form. Touch it, and you touch inevitability. And still, Rome turned its head toward Greece, as though searching across the ruins for acknowledgement. For if the relic truly descended from Greek gods forgotten, then Roman emperors could not claim ownership. They could only claim stewardship. And stewardship always invites the question of accountability. So here you stand, amid cracked stones by the Aegean, with the sea's restless wind pulling at your cloak. The waves crash as though answering unasked questions.
No?
Were these ruins littered with fragments of myth, or fragments of warning? Was the artifact gift, curse, or mirror of the boundary god who delighted in blurring man's deepest categories? The question that remains gnaws at your thoughts. If Rome inherited its soul from Greece, then in truth was the empire merely the vessel for a forgotten god's game. A game played since Mycenaean dawn, now carried on in marble streets of the eternal city? The roads of the empire stretched like veins across soil, carrying grain, iron, soldiers, and rumors alike. Imagine one particular road at night, shadows swallowing milestones, the hollow thud of hooves echoing through mist. This is no ordinary march. This is the secret transit of the artifact. Guarded not by heralds or triumphal processions, but by legionaries ordered to silence. You tread among them, torch smoke stinging your eyes, hearing only the steady crunch of boots and the rolling creak of a concealed wagon. They call it a terre silent, the march of silence. No songs to Mars, no banter between brothers in arms. Only grim faces, eyes darting sideways at the object hidden beneath leather wrappings. Soldiers who had cheered through Gaul and stood fearless before Germanic tribes now cannot shake the weight of unease. For unlike battles where danger bleeds outside, this danger hums within the convoy itself, unseen yet palpable. Strategically, the mission makes no sense. Rome celebrates its power and spectacle. Parades and trophies are meant to intimidate. Why then smuggle? Why dispatch troops at dusk, forbidding them to look upon what they carried? Only one answer satisfies. To reveal the relic would corrupt order itself, planting chaos within Rome before it even reached the walls. But soldiers are men, and men break rules. At a river crossing near Narnia, 3 of them peek beneath the wrappings while others sleep. They whisper of a glow green, like sea light, at midnight trolling softly across the object's curves. They swear that shadows formed inside, taking shape as figures of men long dead. One swears he saw Hector, prince of Troy, whispering behind the glassy surface. Another wept, convinced he heard his dead daughter's laughter. When dawn came, the 3 had clawed their own faces bloody, muttering that it wanted company. They were left behind, recorded as deserters, though deserters they were not. They had simply been claimed. The convoy presses on. At way stations, innkeepers keep count. No one speaks. No one removes armor. Horses refuse to drink near the wagon and must be dragged away, eyes rolling white. Peasants crossing fields halt, sensing unease without explanation, fleeing homeward. One shepherd whispers a prayer to Mercury, god of travelers, begging protection from what he calls the night flame passing. Rome had long relied on augury to interpret omens. No augur dared to bless this journey. Instead, soldiers carry amulets, each one allowed by their commander to whisper prayers in any language they wish. Pagan chants, Greek mutterings, Syrian rituals, all performed side by side in a desperate attempt to balance the unseen weight. Imagine the contradiction. A disciplined legion, the empire's perfection of order, reduced to private tremblings like children resisting nightmares. Their path avoids cities, cutting through valleys, hugging forest lines under cover of dusk. If Rome had thousands of eyes, this convoy wished none upon it. For every pair of eyes risked being turned not outward to enemy, but inward to the shimmer that pulsed from what they carried. Some claimed that when the cloth shifted, birds collapsed mid-flight above the wagon, dead before striking earth. And yet still they marched? Because Rome could command men to do anything, even bear the unbearable. Their commander, scarred by past campaigns, whispered only once, "Our empire devours that which undoes lesser men." His voice betrayed neither doubt nor faith, only resignation to Rome's hunger. The strange journey north to south etched itself into rumor. Farmers who glimpsed torchlight in darkness later spoke of a moving shrine overseen not by priests, but by helmeted soldiers. Others said the moon dimmed when the convoy passed, as though night itself knelt. Skeptics dismissed such things. But centuries later, faded village songs still spoke of Legio Silenti. The silent legion vanished not into war, but into secrets. Ask yourself this. How must it feel to carry a relic no man understands, an object that mocks both Jupiter's priests and Caesar's banners? Did the soldiers believe they were forging empire, merely dragging empire toward a fate unseen? The question that remained lingered over every mile of their secret march. Were the legionaries escorting the artifact as guardians? Or were they the artifact's escort, compelled not by Rome, but by its own silent will? Picture the Senate, columns rising like ribs of a colossal beast, senators robed in white with purple borders, their whispers fluttering louder than their speeches. Marble steps echo with sandals, but what you feel is not the weight of legislation, it is the paranoia dripping between every gaze. For Rome was not ruled by sword alone. It was ruled just as much by rumor, and rumors of the artifact had slithered their way up from the marching legion into the very halls of power. The senators smelled opportunity. To them, legitimacy had always been more dangerous than blades. A general could win 100 battles, but without legitimacy, the Senate could reduce him to exile. Augustus himself draped his reign in Trojan inheritance, divine sanction, omens. If the artifact truly existed, if it could grant a whisper of ancestral gods, or worse, the impression of inevitability, then whoever controlled it would not just control armies, they would control Rome's idea of itself. But envy corrodes even marble. One senator, scribbling late at night, confessed privately in a wax tablet found long after his death, "Even if it is but glass, it will serve." For glass-made God is as powerful as God-made steel. Think carefully about that line, it reveals the politics. Whether the artifact truly held divine power mattered less than the belief that it did. To the Senate's cunning minds, belief would move citizens, legions, provinces alike. Thus betrayal was seeded not of Augustus directly, but of the artifact's secrecy. Conversations turn half-coded. Where is the standard now? Have you glimpsed the Trojan flame? Does the divine cube shift? Arguments masquerade as debates about tax, colonization, or grain shipments. But between lines, every sensitive ear hears it. Some senators schemed ways to remove Augustus from direct possession. Others plotted to share the relic hall while reaching their hands quietly toward leverage they barely understood. Picture a dim chamber beneath the curia, senators lit only by lamps. They whisper of assassination, of seizing the object in chaos. But as they speak, something strange happens. Each man describes a different form of what he has seen or heard. To one, it is a spearhead, sharp enough to pierce destiny. To another, it is a scroll holder glowing with fire. Their discord reveals what soldiers already knew, that the relic changes its face depending on who beholds it. Imagine the suspicion this bred. If your rival claimed a different shape, did he truly see the same thing, or was he lying? Was the artifact favoring him with truer revelation than you? And so whispers of betrayal multiplied, not only against the emperor, but against each other. The artifact did not even need to leave its chamber to dissolve loyalty. Its inconsistent forms scattered unity like shattered glass, Senator once declared, slamming fist upon marble. If it truly blesses the line of Aeneas, then why does it not present the same to all Romans alike? His words spread quickly, planting doubt in those who once tethered Roman pride to Trojan inheritance. Amid this haze of poisoned trust, an odd pattern developed. At least 3 senators claimed to hear voices calling them by name in their sleep. Another awoke nightly to see the spiral rune traced in condensation upon his villa walls. It was as though drawing nearer to the object meant carrying contamination home on the soul, like a sickness that whispered instead of coughing. Meanwhile, administrators struggled to maintain ordinary order. Grain deficits and roads fell to second concern. Senators devoted hours, then days, sharpening strategies of who might reach the artifact first. But how do you control something that refuses singular definition? How do you carve law around a shimmering unknown? Rome believed law was stronger than magic, yet here was something that melted law like wax near flame. If you sat among them in that Senate chamber surrounded by silk-tongued men salivating for relic power, wouldn't you mistrust even your closest ally? Wouldn't you wonder if tonight, as you crossed your atrium, the artifact's whisper might already be nesting in his mind? It was betrayal not yet enacted, but preordained. For secrets never survive among Rome's political vultures. The question the artifact imposed on their hearts and on yours, listening now, was unspoken, but clear. If controlling Rome meant controlling belief, what price would you pay to seize the one thing that disobeyed all belief? And the question that remained bled quietly through every ruined pact. Was it treason to betray emperor for artifact? Tor treason to let emperor and artifact fuse into one? The chamber is dark. Torches sputter, as though resisting the air itself. When the wrappings at last peel away from the relic, an unsettling silence settles on the men present. All eyes fix on its lower edge, where lines are carved or, are they grown? No one agrees. The inscriptions glimmer faintly, like veins of quicksilver running through black stone. At first, senators believe they see Latin letters, ordinary and familiar. Words like imperium and fatum seem to emerge clearly. But as eyes linger, Latin bends into something else. One senator rubs his own eyelids, muttering he now reads Greek verse, praising forgotten gods. Another gasps, insisting the letters no longer resemble letters at all, but shapes curling like vines into faces, ancient, immortal ones. A soldier brought to guard insists it is no writing but bloody scratches, still slick, shifting wetly before his eyes. What is carved upon the base of the artifact refuses to remain still. Later recollections call it inscriptio cruntae, the blood-smeared inscription. Ports multiply of changing appearance from day to day, even hour to hour. Some swear that when touched, the grooves pulse like open veins. Others that when water spilled across the object, the characters rearrange themselves, as though preferring to be washed clean before reciting a new truth. Those brave or mad enough to copy the text always found their parchments altered, wax tablets warped, ink scrawls melted into spirals before drying. By dawn, entire sessions of scribes disintegrated into nonsense. A curious rumor spread. The artifact rejected the act of being remembered. It spoke, it carved, it pulsed, but it despised replication. This blood-smeared writing carried one menacing characteristic above all. It spoke directly to whoever gazed upon it. Some claimed the Latin phrases formed prophecies of war dates and names that would soon prove true. Others swore they saw curses not against Rome but against their own blood, predicting deaths of wives and children. More disturbing, some saw themselves addressed by name, letters curling to spell their identities perfectly. Imagine the horror of a senator reading his own birth name glowing along an impossible stone in a chamber, where none other admitted seeing it. Whose language was it really? Some argued the words belonged to the Etruscans. Others claimed Babylonian mages had left them. A philosopher once whispered, "This is no tongue of men at all, it is the language of the thing itself, reshaping perception to masquerade as our tongues." If so, then the inscription was not message, but invasion seeding itself into minds as though carving sentences. The artifact proved worse than tempting. It was participatory. Senators snarled in debates about which prophecy was real because each swore to different text. Unity fractured on the slab of blood-smeared words. One group demanded Augustus crown himself with the artifact in hand. Another screamed to bury it beneath volcanic ash. The third only wept, unable to decide between curse and gift. And you, what would you do if you glimpsed words sacred to you, carved into flowing lines of blood? Would you believe? Would you resist? Would you surrender? Wondering if resisting only fed the letters further into your marrow. At times the inscription seemed to whisper audibly, though no tongue moved. Guards sleeping nearby woke screaming, convinced the letters had slithered across their bodies like serpents. One officer burned his clothes after dreaming of script crawling across fabric. Another drowned himself in the Tiber, leaving a final note that read simply, "The line spoke me." Roman religion thrived on inscriptions. Every temple, every altar, every decree relied on texts to bind gods to men. But this was different. This was inscription, not as record, but as parasite. Was it prophecy from God's oar? A trick from something less divine, more cunning? The senators argued, but the artifact simply shimmered. Words rearranged themselves as though laughing at confusion. Each glimpse brought not certainty, but collapse. Round it, voices always rose, never calmed. Round it, trust always withered, never thrived. And thus, the blood-smeared text whispered as Rome looked away, disguising chaos as revelation. What it demanded could not yet be said, but it demanded something. The question that remained crawled into the halls of Senate and temples alike. Was the shifting inscription Rome's fate carved in blood? ... Or was it writing Rome's fate even as Rome stared, helpless, unable to stop the words from reshaping history? The night of disappearance came not like a robbery, not like a raid, but like a storm breaking across silence. Rome had settled into uneasy tolerance of the relic kept, it hidden, guarded by oaths and iron, whispered about but never openly wielded. And then, without warning, it was gone. The records agree on this much. The artifact vanished beneath a sky that split with lightning, though no clouds had gathered. The storm came boiling from nowhere, rumbling through marble streets and rattling bronze gates. Winds tore across the Palatine Hill, as if invisible chariots raced above. Statues toppled, roof tiles cracked, but the strangest damage struck the chamber of the relic itself. Witnesses swore that torches went out at once, extinguished not by air but as though smothered by command. Guards who stood mere feet from the object claimed to feel the ground clutch their ankles, holding them to the spot as thunder rolled inside their ears. When light returned, the artifact was no longer in its chamber. Imagine being a guard in that moment. One instant, hands steady on the spear. The next, the shape you have devoted your sanity to protecting is gone, torn away, not by thief, but perhaps by the gods themselves. Two of those guards never spoke again. Their tongues went rigid, goldish, as though calcified by unseen fire. One clawed at his own chest until he died, insisting they came to claim it back. And yet, curiously, no doors were broken, no locks shattered. The chamber sealed as securely after as before. The pedestal, once warm now, stood cold, empty, lifeless. On its surface was left only a faint scorch, the spiral rune branded into stone almost mocking, as if the artifact had signed its absence with a final flourish. Rome awoke to chaos. Senators blamed each other, whispering of betrayal that rivals had spirited it away in secret. Priests accused foreign cults, insisting Eastern magi infiltrated the capital and stole it during the storm. Superstitious citizens muttered that the gods had arrived physically, descending as lightning to reclaim what mortal hands should never clutch. But no one agreed on a single version. Some swore they saw figures in cloaks carrying an object through alleys that night. Others saw nothing but unearthly light crawling down the Tiber. A strange omen was recorded. Hundreds of ravens circled the Capitoline Hill that morning, scattering only when drums beat from the barracks. Was it a sign of mourning or a funeral for Rome's stolen destiny? The disappearance stoked hysteria. Without the artifact, those who believed it vital panicked. Had Rome lost its divine mandate? Was empire suddenly adrift? Augustus raged privately, though publicly he acted calm. Rumors swore he scoured households at night, searching villas for concealed relics. To admit its loss openly would fracture his image as chosen emperor, so an official explanation never came. It simply slipped beneath silence, one of history's most calculated omissions. But whispers always whispers remained. A merchant spoke of seeing soldiers march south beyond the walls, burdened with a wagon beneath storm cover. A Syrian priest claimed the artifact had not been stolen at all, but had walked itself away, carried by no hand visible to mortals. It returns, he said, always to return. Consider the psychological shatter. Rome depended on certainty, laws, hierarchies, rituals. Yet overnight, the object that was both threat and crown vanished with no trace. It reduced proud senators to children fumbling in dark corridors, mocked priests who claimed authority over gods, yet could not bind this one. It left soldiers haunted by lightning scars across their arms. Would you, in that city, still trust power carved in marble? Or would you begin to think marble itself brittle compared to unseen thunder that could devour stone and leave only scorched runes behind? From that night forward, the artifact's reality could never again be denied. Before, skeptics could dismiss it as rumor. After its disappearance in the storm, the vacuum itself sang louder than any evidence. Because objects built by men can be stolen by men. But this was gone in a manner so strange it suggested choice not theft, but escape. And the question that remained tore at Roman hearts, echoing through centuries: did the artifact's disappearance mark Rome's first true theft of destiny, or its first glimpse of destiny breaking free from Roman chains? Rome did not sleep after the disappearance. Fires guttered in braziers, guards doubled their rounds, priests cast handfuls of salt into sacred flames, hands trembling. Yet for all the fear, none were prepared for the whispers that came next, that gods themselves had entered the city, prowling through alleyways in mortal guise, hunting what had been taken from them. Picture narrow streets under moonlight, the smell of damp stone walls after the storm, echoes of sandals slapping the cobbles, though no figures appear when you turn. Romans claimed they saw strangers walking without shadow. Others told of eyes glowing in torchlight beneath hoods. A baker swore he saw 3 men leave no footprints in soft mud outside his shop. Rumor spread. These were not thieves, not rebels, but divine beings, incarnate, disguised, searching desperately to retrieve what Rome had mishandled. It was not unthinkable. After all, Roman myth always allowed gods to walk among mortals, whether for amusement, punishment, or guidance. Jupiter himself was said to take humble bodies when testing Rome's virtue. Could it be blasphemy to believe that the artifact had belonged not merely to mortals at all, but to an entire pantheon, stolen and misplaced in human hands? Stories multiplied. A soldier stationed on the Aventine claimed he saw a woman clothed in light, like molten silver. Her features veiled yet unmistakably inhuman. She stood looking toward the Palatine, whispering words he did not recognize, but that rattled his heart like thunder. When he called out, she did not move, but in the blink of an eye, she was gone. For weeks he carried burns along his chest, despite no flame ever touched him. Another tale. 3 children playing in a courtyard disappeared for 2 days. When they returned, their voices were altered deeper. Older speaking of the shining thing that was ours long before, families rushed them into temples. Weeping, convinced the gods had borrowed their bodies for speech, then released them. It was not only sightings. Dreams became epidemic. Fishermen, patricians, even slaves confessed visions of towering presences wandering the streets, not to smite, but to search. Always, the whispers circled the same desire. The artifact lost, unsettled, calling its rightful owners back. The city itself seemed restless dogs, barked into nothing. Temple fires burned unusually high. And the Tiber's current swirled backward for a night, baffling priests who failed to write auspices into sense. Imagine you are a Roman living then. Do you trust your emperor, your senate, when shadows walk and voices ripple through your dreams, not of rebels, not of foreigners, but of deities themselves, aching for something gone missing? Would you dare to cross a figure on the street, uncertain whether it was man or divine sentry? What unnerved them most was not vengeance, but desperation. These were not gods arriving to punish, but to reclaim. And desperation made even gods unpredictable. If their relic had escaped, what lengths might they go to draw it back? Rome's walls, Rome's armies, meant nothing to immortals. For once, the mightiest city felt naked, trembling under stars, and so rituals tried to appease. Sacrifices doubled. Priests burned black bulls whole, sending smoke as apology. Yet none of it calmed the city. Some whispered that it was too late, that once gods themselves left their natural thrones to walk among men, the order of things had already collapsed. Rome could command men, but not gods come to reclaim their property. The question that remained haunted every eye that scanned the nighttime crowds. If gods truly walked Rome's streets to recover what was theirs, what happened if the artifact no longer wanted to return to them? Beneath Rome's splendor, another Rome always breathed, a city of tunnels, shrines, and secrecy. Catacombs ran like veins under marble, housing not only the dead, but cults who worshipped what others feared. And after the artifact's disappearance, whispers turned downward into those shadow halls, where Rome's forgotten soul gathered. You walk in torchlight under carved ceilings damp with salt and time. Here, walls are scratched with symbol spirals, horned figures, eyes without faces. They are not Christian yet, not the quiet faith that would later fill these spaces, but something older, stranger. The cult beneath Rome. They are said to gather in silence, broken only by chants that fracture into sobs. In the center of their rite stands an altar of rough stone. Upon it rests not the artifact itself, but a perfect replica crafted from blackened glass. They believe the real object hides among them, passed from hand to hand, revealed only during the darkest hours when the city above sleeps unaware. Strange accounts survive. One speaks of acolytes pressing their palms to the replica to feel it vibrate with unnatural warmth, swearing it responded to those who carried Trojan blood. Another describes sacrifices not of animals, but of memory followers writing their past upon tablets, burning them, and declaring themselves servants with no lineage but the object's line. They claimed this death of personal history bound them closer to the god of thresholds whom Greece hinted at and Rome refused to name. But here's the eerie part. Even among these cultists who worship shadows, Few recorded sensations that matched the real artifact's reports. Their scribes described inscriptions that moved whispers in their dreams, visions of rivers running backward. Could it be coincidence? Could the cult have stumbled onto the actual artifact, smuggled beneath Rome, right under Augustus and the Senate's feet? Some legends argue yes, that the disappearance of the relic during the thunderstorm was no theft by gods, it's no vanishing miracle, but simply an inside job. Guards, priests, even senators may have colluded to hide it beneath Rome, creating not just cult, but custody. When gods were rumored to search streets, perhaps they searched wrong, while the object slept in catacomb shadows, feeding worshippers its mirrored whispers.
Watching the dread of men who suspected this truth but could not accuse.
If the artifact lay in hands of an underground sect, invisible to law and shielded by silence, then empire itself stood hostage to their hidden rights. Rome could fight legions, but how do you fight an enemy holding your destiny beneath your own feet? The cultists became more daring. Stories tell of midnight processions filing silently through alleys, cloaked figures carrying small boxes marked with spirals. Citizens half asleep swore they heard laughter low, guttural, not quite human rising from beneath sewer grates. A baker collapsing in sudden seizure babbled that faces in the stone had invited him downward. For every new god Rome enthroned, the cult reminded them of the one Rome feared to name. And religions in Rome were always political. The cult truly held the artifact. They held a power capable of toppling imperial aura itself. For what mattered more in Rome, armed eagles or divine sanction? A ruler without sanction was already dethroned in soul, if not yet in flesh. The cult understood this, and so their chants grew bolder. Their spiral symbols etched even on the temples above, daring Romans to notice. Ask yourself this. If you knelt in those tunnels, hearing echoes of gods who claimed Rome as plaything, would you tremble in horror? Or would you rejoice believing at last you touched truth deeper than the marble altars above? Perhaps that temptation explains why the cult survived centuries, always fully extinguished, always whispering, always waiting. The question that remained hung in the suffocating air of Rome's catacombs: was the artifact truly hidden in their hands, all along feeding on hushed worship? Beneath the city, or had they only conjured shadows of a godless fear, while the real object hunted elsewhere beyond reach of mortals? The reign of Caligula was already a pageant of unease, a procession of madness draped across imperial robes. But imagine how madness deepens when fed not only by human delusions, but by whispers from something far older. Rome soon learned that when a man who declares himself God stares too long into an artifact already humming with divinity, reality itself begins to contort. Caligula had heard the stories as a child, glimpses of Augustus' obsession, its whispers of storms, and, most chilling, the secret mutterings about gods who had walked Rome's streets. He inherited not just throne, but hunger. Unlike Augustus, who cloaked his pursuit in ritual, Caligula pursued openly. He declared himself Jupiter reborn, Neptune's brother, Apollo's rival. He wanted Rome to tremble not only before emperors, but before the notion that gods and men had fused into single flesh, his flesh. What relic could better serve such an ambition than the shimmering stone, the shifting cube sphere that mocked human eyes? If other emperors had treated it as dangerous tool, Caligula treated it as mirror. He demanded priests bring it forth into chambers that he declared shrines to himself. Senators feared to refuse. Soldiers obeyed with trembling hands. The artifact was placed before him, and he gazed long, too long. Witnesses swore that after his first evening with it, he no longer spoke merely as emperor. His words rang with strange pauses, as if someone else whispered lines that he repeated. He began to describe conversations with gods, not in poetic metaphor, but as literal exchanges. Apollo envied me last night. Juno begged my forgiveness. The threshold lord offered me his very scepter. His courtiers laughed nervously, but fear gradually replaced amusement. They wondered whether he lied or whether the artifact had in fact begun answering him. Caligula's behavior grew grotesque. He paraded the artifact across private feasts, making senators bow not only to him, but to it, as though both were equals. He blurred sacrilege into performance, demanding animal sacrifices not to Jupiter, not to Mars, but to his own name, with the artifact standing at his side as though officiant in the rite. Some priests fainted, others defected, but none stopped him, For to oppose was death or worse, exile into insanity. As many believe, the stone punished dissenters with nightmares until their minds cracked. The artifact itself reacted strangely under his possession. Guards said it grew warmer in his company, glowing faintly whenever he touched it. Unlike others who saw shifting inscriptions, Caligula insisted the inscriptions stabilized for him, forming passages that praised his eternal reign. Whether delusion or manipulation, no man could argue easily, for those who claimed they saw otherwise were executed. It was only Caligula's vision that survived, etched into fear. And then came the infamous declaration. Caligula announced he would place the artifact within a temple of his own making, one that declared himself Dominus Deorum, Lord of the Gods. This was not symbolic. He ordered engineers to design an altar, not for Jupiter's capital, but for him, with the relic enshrined as proof. The city shuddered at such blasphemy. Even senators accustomed to tyranny whispered dread. If Rome's emperor wielded a relic believed to shape destiny, did he not seize power even from the gods themselves? But perhaps the strangest tale comes from a messenger. He claimed in private that upon entering Caligula's chamber, he saw the emperor conversing not with men, but with figures indistinct, like statues half-formed from mist, gathered around the artifact. Caligula smiled, nodded, laughed, as though in counsel with them. The messenger fled, never speaking aloud again. His written account, smuggled later, asks the haunting question, did he rule Rome still? Or had Rome already been surrendered to beings shaping him as their mask? Soon, madness overflowed. Caligula demanded the moon itself be brought to him, boasted of dining with gods nightly, declared legions should march as though to war against Neptune. But beneath the theatrical insanity, one pattern persisted. His constant nearness to the artifact seemed to draw vigor from it, but also disintegration. His reign ended in assassination, not only for cruelty, but because those who remained feared what he might do if the artifact became fully his. Some swore conspirators found the object in that chamber, slick with new inscriptions. Others claimed it had already vanished again on the very night Caligula's blood hit marble. And you, if you beheld an emperor dissolve into a vessel for unseen whispers, would you call him mad or possessed? Would you mourn him as human tyrant, or fear he had become something no blade could kill? The question that remained after his death passed through every Roman mind like thunder. Did Caligula go mad because of the artifact? Or did the artifact finally find a man mad enough to serve it without resistance? The artifact had already ensnared Rome, but its ripples spread wider than Italy. Whispers crossed seas, drifting on trade routes, murmured along the Silk Road, carried in the guarded mouths of envoys who claimed they came not in war, but in warning. Imagine the Senate chamber as envoys from the East arrive clothed in strange silks dyed with hues Roman eyes have never seen, their accents heavy, their words sharpened by urgency. They were not merchants. They were not tribute bearers. They came as prophets and keepers of memory, claiming descent from Babylonian priests who had centuries earlier safeguarded knowledge of the artifact. Their message was stark. Rome had taken into its heart what wiser nations had buried. The relic was a curse, born not of Trojan valor nor Greek twilight, but of older Mesopotamian rites, a tool stolen from gods themselves, chained beneath ziggurats because no mortal empire could shoulder its hunger. The envoys told tales Rome dismissed as myth, yet their conviction could not be ignored. They spoke of Nebuchadnezzar's halls, or tablets once warned against the shard that remembers. They described a time in Babylon when kings trembled, not from Neville spears, but from visions granted by the object. Whole cities consumed in dream. Languages tangled, men babbling in strange tongues until madness carried them away. To the east, the artifact was not a relic of inheritance. It was a fire deliberately extinguished to spare mankind. Senators rolled their eyes, scoffing at barbarian superstition, but some among them shivered. For the envoy's description of visions and inscriptions matched too closely the strange events already known in Rome. Could it be that others before had suffered identically, that the artifact, this shifting mirror, demanded human vessels only to unmake them? The envoys grew passionate, warning that the curse did not belong to a single city, nor a single people. It stalked humanity itself. Every empire believes it is chosen, one said, his voice echoing along marble, until it lays hands upon it. Then, Empire finds it was only chosen to end. Strong words, spilling like fire across Rome's proud chamber. You can imagine the senator's dilemma. To believe the foreigners would mean admitting that Rome, master of the world, had become prisoner of a story much older, cast in Mesopotamian dust. To dismiss them left only silence, and silence breeds fear, for even skepticism trembles when thunder already echoes in the soul. Priests responded with denouncements, burning incense louder, drowning warnings under ritual. Yet even they seemed unsettled. Some whispered in secret that Babylonian magi may have been closest to truth of the gods, that Rome merely inherited fragments. A handful of augurs began to dream vividly of towers crumbling, rivers running red. They denied the link by day, but scribbled prophecies by night, their hands shaking. Imagine yourself there, hearing the envoys speak of curses baked into human destiny. Would you dismiss them as manipulators? Or would you feel that in listening you uncovered a message meant not for Rome alone, but for all mankind? That the artifact was not treasure, but trap? And in the back of every Roman ear lingered the thought unspoken. Why had these men traveled so far, risking life and dignity, if not to prevent repetition of a doom already written in clay tablets centuries earlier? What did they fear Rome would awaken that Babylon had barely survived? The embassy ended in silence. The envoys were dismissed politely, their warnings folded in records, their presence expelled from the city. But Rome never forgot. Too many sleepless senators replayed their phrases, their eyes haunted by foreign certainty. And so, the strange dilemma grew sharper. To the Romans, the artifact was an inheritance, legitimizing empire. To the East, it was a curse, promising annihilation. The question that remained tortured both visions. If Babylon had been destroyed by ignoring the artifact Escall, was Rome foolishly repeating history, or was history repeating itself, dragging empire after empire into the same whirlpool? Rome's pride often stood against plagues like legions against barbarians, resilient, disciplined, unfazed. Yet there came nights when the pestilence felt unearthly, arriving on winds, striking not along predictable seasons, but in waves that mirrored the artifact's strange reappearances. Imagine a city swollen with fear, the sound of coughing echoing through tenement walls, torchlight flickering against rows of bodies laid hastily beside temples. And into the whispers of epidemic slid another murmur. Wherever the artifact appeared, death soon followed. Consider the pattern. In Lazio's shrines, after farmers first reported the stone humming, livestock began dying without wound or obvious sickness. During Augustus's secret obsession, rumors told of sudden fever striking in districts closest to the Palatine Hill. Later, when Caligula paraded the object in his private feasts, the plague flared violently in lower quarters, as though the stone's exposure had seeped outward into the common air. Was this mere coincidence? Or was the artifact not only mirror of fate, but its carrier delivering contagion as shadow follows form? Priests struggled to interpret. Some declared pestilence was punishment trome, and handling the thing had angered familiar gods. Others dared to whisper the opposite, that the artifact was itself a god, demanding tribute not in sacrifice but in the slow exhaustion of human life. Each citizen lost was offering fuel for hunger older than Jupiter's reign. Even ordinary citizens noticed the way outbreaks coincided eerily with the relic. Its known moments, the storm of its disappearance, Caligula's possession, the cults beneath the city. Always afterward, illness swelled. Philosophers took darker interest. A Stoic writer suggested the artifact was not simply matter but carrier of miasma, spiritual pollution. He likened it to Pandora's box, an opened vessel releasing invisible ruin into air and blood. Yet if this metaphor explained plague, it also offered a terrifying thought. Could closing or destroying the object extinguish Rome's curse, or had its influence already soaked too deeply into the veins of empire? At docks, sailors whispered that the Tiber itself had turned ill, reflecting the artifact's unseen fire. Bread tasted bitter, wine soured sooner. Even animals grew unsettled. Dogs whined constantly in certain districts, refusing to eat. Birds collided mid-flight as though drunk. Rome itself sensed contagion beyond germs, contagion of presence. You find yourself asking, was plague merely a natural cycle framed by superstition? Or was superstition the only lens capable of seeing disease for what it truly was, an echo spilling outward from forces men were not meant to touch. Witnesses described victims seized not only by fever but by visions. Some claimed the dying muttered in tongues foreign to them, as though their last breath translated the shifting script of the artifact itself. Others clutched the air, insisting they saw light bending in corners of rooms, green flames rippling like when the stone had been reported uncovered. What are plagues, if not reminders of mortality? But here they became hints of something worse: assimilation into whatever unseen current the object emitted. Rome fought with fires and quarantines. Priests walked streets clanging cymbals, chanting hymns to ward infection. Families pleaded at altars to Apollo, the healer, and Asclepius. Yet the illnesses swept on, as indifferent to ritual as the artifact was indifferent to reason. The link became unavoidable in whispers and muttered that every time the object shifted owner, every time it appeared or vanished, pestilence shadowed in its wake. We used to stand close to such an object if you knew plague traveled with it. Would you not question whether illness was punishment, or perhaps contagion carried in its unnatural material, secreting something not earthly into mortal veins? For those who believed, every cough in the city became testimony. For those who doubted, the repeated coincidence slowly chipped at reason until doubt itself felt like weakness. And so, quietly but relentlessly, a dark thought seeded itself into Roman life. Rome was sick, not because gods were angered, nor because foreign pests had entered, but because the artifact itself was infection personified. A relic not of divine blessing, but divine blight destiny disguised as disease. The question that remained pulsed through every cough and death rattle: was the artifact merely an omen carried beside plague, or was plague its chosen language, the way it imprinted itself upon living flesh? In the shadow of pestilence, philosophy lingered like a lantern trying to resist storm winds. Rome prided itself not only on conquest but on thought and stoics, in porticos Epicureans, in gardens, skeptics who asked whether truth itself had meaning. When the relic was whispered through alleys and courts, these thinkers could not resist interpreting it. For ideas, after all, were their battlefields. Imagine yourself in a shaded colonnade along the Forum, hearing the calm voice of a philosopher echo against marble. He is no priest, no senator, but he challenges both with a steady question: is the artifact a god? Or is it merely a mirror in which mortals see only themselves? The Stoics argue first. To them, everything unfolds according to fat immutable fate. If the artifact delivered visions, prophecies, or inscriptions that bent perception, then it was not a god's trick but fate itself revealing what already must occur. One Stoic compares it to a polished bronze shield. When you look, you see not its invention, but the shape of destiny carved already upon your soul. To them, artifact requires no rituals nor sacrifices, it only reveals the order that was always there. But Epicureans scoff. They see not divine order but delusion. For them, gods may exist, but they do not meddle. The artifact's whispers, they insist, are the trembling of human nerves corrupted by fear. One philosopher jests cruelly. Show me a man whose dice land in patterns, and I will show you only his trembling hand, not fate taking shape. And yet, even he admits, Inisa inscriptions shifting from Latin into unknown scripts gnawed at the Epicurean conviction that material, and only material, rules the cosmos. Then come the skeptics. They declare proudly that no claim can ever be certain, but their questions are sharp. Cutting deeply into the matter, if each man sees a different shape, is the artifact not proof that perception is illusion? If each inscription speaks uniquely, is it not embodiment of doubt itself, sculpted in stone? The skeptics laugh, and yet their laughter rings hollow. For the object embodies their creed too perfectly, mocking them with physical form. And so, debates spiral. Some insist the artifact symbolizes the tension between free will and destiny. One Stoic warns, if it tempts you to action, beware, for even resistance is preordained. An Epicurean counters, if it tempts you. It proves only that human minds are weak when faced with illusion. The skeptic simply shrugs and says, whether real or illusion, you suffer the same. Philosophers who touch the relic, though they tell stranger tales. One Stoic who was permitted brief contact emerged white-haired overnight, muttering quietly that he had seen the turning of the spheres. He refused food, speaking only of Rome collapsing into itself like a devoured sun. An Epicurean placed his palm upon it and collapsed laughing, insisting he felt nothing more than cold stone. He died the next day, although autopsies found no cause. A skeptic touched it and never spoke again, not denial, not affirmation. Silence became his entire philosophy, an unanswerable rebuttal. Imagine yourself amid these debates, listening as wise men quarrel around you, their robes fluttering in summer breezes, their words sharp as daggers. What if they are all right? What if the artifact is fate, illusion, and silence, depending on who confronts it? Wouldn't that make it the most dangerous truth of all? The paradox unsettled even Rome's scholars. If the relic was fate embodied, then commands of senate or emperor meant nothing beside it. If it was delusion, then Rome's most powerful minds had already surrendered their sanity to fiction. If it was both, then every action already played puppet to forces irreconcilable. And so philosophy, usually balm or guide, became only deeper labyrinth. Rulers grew impatient. Temple priests scorned such empty talk. Yet the questions seated themselves quietly in the citizen's heart. What moves his choice, fate, or madness? The artifact's silence mocked them all. It glimmered once, shifted its shapes, showed no single truth. Ideas bloomed around it like ivy around an unyielding stone. And still, it offered no final word, only reflection. The question that remained haunted Rome's most brilliant minds was the artifact itself. Truth, or was it only the cruel mirror proving mankind could never know truth at all? Every empire breeds its rebels, not always men with daggers, but sometimes men with silence. Among the generals who brushed against the artifact's presence, one stands apart, not because he coveted it, but because he refused it. His name is blurred by history, half buried beneath censored scrolls, yet the rumor survives. He was offered the relic, and he turned it away. Picture him encamped beside his legion at the Rhine frontier. Tents lie scattered against the forest edge, flames crackle in iron braziers, and wounded soldiers whisper prayers into the night air. In his command tent, a small chest rests beside his maps. Inside, wrapped in cloth, is said to be the shining object of prize meant to secure his loyalty, perhaps even to tempt him toward usurpation. Officials in Rome sent it under secrecy, sure that he, ambitious and respected, would join its whispering empire. But he did not. Witnesses record his sleepless nights. He would sit alone with the chest yet unopened, staring at it as though it breathed. Legionaries passing the tent swore they heard voices within, though no one spoke. Once, during inspection, he snapped at a soldier simply for glancing in its direction. "Do not look," he muttered, "for it already looks at you." At last he acted, summoned aides, declared the object untouchable, and had the chest carried to the river before dawn. There, at a secluded bend, he cast the entire burden into the dark waters. Some soldiers gasped, others cheered in secret, but all recognized the enormity of the deed. To reject a gift believed sacred or cursed was not defiance merely of men, but of gods. Rome did not forget men who spurned gifts of fate. Rumor split in two. Some swore the general's rejection was noble, sparing his men the madness that haunted others. They said he knew too well the god's price, and so acted to protect discipline. Others believed he lied, that he did not cast it away at all, but concealed it, becoming secret custodian against Rome's corruption. The Rhine flowed swift. Whatever truth the waters carried remains drowned, but his legion felt change. They marched lighter afterward, free of mutters and omens, their dice rolling in random patterns once again. Yet as weeks passed, new unease formed. Soldiers began to ask one another, had the curse departed with the river's current? Or had it simply shifted into new form, hidden in fog and forest? The general himself grew haunted. Letters in his name speak of visions long after, still seeing inscriptions in dreams, still waking to voices by his cot. Casting it away had not erased it, only reminded him that rejection itself was a bond. To deny, he confessed, is still to acknowledge its rule. He became quieter, sterner, withdrawing from glory. Rome offered him triumph. He declined. Rome offered province. He refused. He chose obscurity, knowing ambition would only draw the relic back. And were you himward, you have done the same. If Rome's destiny glittered inside a box on your map table, power beyond comprehension lay beneath your hand, would you cast it into black water, or hold it and accept ruin with glory? The man's story withered, erased from monuments, scrubbed from records. Perhaps Augustus' heirs feared memory of rejection would spread, teaching others that refusal was possible. Better to erase him than permit the lesson. But in border folklore, soldiers whispered that night by the river. They saw the water glow green for hours, like a wound in the current. They prayed the object had sunk beyond reach. Others murmured it did not sink at all, but rolled back upon banks further downriver, waiting to be found again by hands weaker than his. The question that remained is as cruel as it is unresolved. Did the general prove humanity had the strength to deny destiny, or did his refusal only show that destiny was cruel enough to return biding its time for weaker men? Rome has always feared fire more than sword. Enemies could be repelled at walls, but flame had no border. It devoured temples, forums, archives, memory itself. And so, when one night fire tore through a sacred building that housed centuries of records, many believed coincidence burned alongside papers. But those who had stood too near the artifact whispered otherwise. What vanished in flame was not chance, it was strategy. Picture the Temple of Vesta, where Rome's oldest records were safeguarded. Scrolls tracing lineages back to Troy, prophecies, decrees, auguries documented by long-dead priests. One evening the flames erupted, fast, too fast, sweeping shelves before water could be lifted. Witnesses spoke of heat unnatural, blue rather than red, and of scrolls curling into ash while leaving stone unscorched. Some claimed the fire did not spread beyond what it sought. It consumed records, and only records, later archivists confirmed. Among the scrolls lost were those detailing strange omens during Aeneas' exile, inscriptions detailing Trojan rites, and fragments of Greek hymns about a shard carried by gods. In other words, the very connective tissue tying Rome's myth to the artifact. Gone, swallowed by inferno. Senators grieved publicly, mourning cultural heritage. Privately, theories bled through. Some believed Augustus himself had ordered the fire when anxiety about the object's legitimacy grew too sharp. Others suspected cultists beneath Rome inflamed the temple deliberately, ensuring no one else could trace their secret's roots. A handful even whispered the fire was no human hand at all, but radiance sparked by the relic itself, purging curiosity from papyrus as it purged sense from men. The common citizen noticed different signs. As the fire raged, they swore the Tiber's current reversed again for a single hour, dragging offerings upstream. Birds fell silent citywide, as though listening. Horses panicked, trampling their own stalls. To them, the fire was not mere loss of paper, but a visible anger. The artifact answering Rome's prying gaze by erasing what men hoped to decipher. Imagine standing in Rome that night, hearing crackling flame carry the voices of histories erased forever. Shelves that could have told truth now gone, leaving only rumor wrapped tighter. How would you feel to know humanity's link to its origin story could vanish in a single tongue of fire, leaving in its place silence into which new lies and myths could be folded? Afterward, the burn smelled not of ordinary ash, but of iron and resin, bitter on breath. Some archivists swore even charred fragments retained inscriptions that shifted as they blackened, as though eager to escape record once again. They burned fully only after being ground in offerings to river gods. Rome's memory had been scarred. What might have untangled myth from fact lay vanished. From that point forward, every story of the artifact was guesswork, distorted, a tapestry missing half its threads. To some, this made the relic even more potent, for mystery without document becomes infinite. To others, it meant doom. A curse grown shapeless cannot be fought with clarity. And here lies irony. The empire that prided itself on law, archive, order had its most dangerous secret safeguarded by accident of destruction. Could Rome continue to cling to fate without parchment to prove it? Or did the blankness left behind make men imagine the object greater than it ever was? And so the question slowly poisoned minds. Did the temple fire erase history for Rome's protection, or did it serve the artifact itself, granting it invisibility and power beyond parchment's chains? The Colosseum, Rome's grand arena, thundered with the roar of 50,000 voices. Dust rising with every clash of steel. Yet, amid the spectacle blood, sand, spectacle designed to reassure Rome of its control, and even stranger undercurrent spread, whispers that the missing artifact had not left the city at all. Some claimed it was buried beneath the Colosseum itself, and its presence bled through the games in terrible ways. Imagine yourself seated beneath blazing sun, the crowd chanting, horns blaring, gladiators facing each other with lethal grace. But then suddenly, amid the human carnage, the atmosphere shifts. Fighters pause mid-strike, glaring upward, as though responding to a command unheard by spectators. Some fall to their knees inexplicably, murmuring in foreign tongues, their eyes glazed white. Others erupt in unseasoned ferocity, tearing into opponents as though possessed by invisible hands. Chroniclers record repeated episodes, gladiators lifting their weapons, hesitating, then turning to the ground as if listening. One shouted to the sky, "Tell me no more," before swinging his sword into his own chest. Another claimed afterward he had heard a voice promising victory if he struck, yet when he turned, no one had spoken. The crowd gasped, but organizers explained it away as frenzy. Those closer to the cult's whispers murmured differently. The artifact was speaking beneath the stone foundations, its echo reaching minds already pushed near breaking. The spiral rune appeared, they said, burned into sand by lightning on 3 separate occasions. Ordinary lightning during cloudless games bolts, striking not audience nor structure, but the exact center where gladiators fought. The rune's mark glowed moments, then vanished as sand was smoothed, but veterans swore it returned again at future matches. Was it coincidence? Or proof the artifact slumbered beneath the amphitheater, unquiet? Even beasts brought for spectacle grew wild. Lions refused to leave cages, bellowing in tones so loud they cracked wood beams. Elephants panicked, trampling handlers, staring at the arena's floor as though sensing something buried deep. Organizers paid dearly to cover this, distracting crowds with more blood. But the rumor swelled. It was no mere games that enthralled Rome, it was the artifact, feeding, bending. One philosopher wrote bitterly, "The arena is no longer Rome's stage of power, it is altar." His words were condemned, his house emptied, yet fragments survive. He believed every cheer from the crowd lifted not to emperor nor spectacle, but downward to the thing Rome should never have hidden there. Arena as temple, gladiators as priests of unwilling sacrifice. Would you shout louder in such a place, trying to drown out dread with noise? Or would you grow silent, straining against the impossibility that your soul, too, might be overheard by something stirring beneath stone? Even after games ended, strange echoes lingered in the Colosseum. At night, guards patrolling swore they heard cheers though stadiums were empty. Whispers slithering across arches in languages they had never spoken. One man confessed he saw the sand ripple like water and shapes form briefly a spear, a cube, a face dissolving as dawn touched the stones. He went mad weeks later, carving spirals into his own flesh before collapsing. Rome thrived on control of spectacle, but here, spectacle betrayed it. Fear spread not in senators' halls, but in the hearts of common citizens. For if madness blossomed in games, what remained untouched? The artifact, once imperial secret, now seemed to breathe through Rome itself. And the question that remained settled heavily on the crowds of roaring spectators. Each secretly trembling, were the voices guiding gladiators merely frenzy of death, or was the artifact itself orchestrating spectacle feeding unseen shaping? Rome's greatest stage into its own theater. Beneath Rome, where shadows congeal against damp stone, where oil lamps sputter against air so stale it feels alive, another chapter unfolds: the Christians of the catacombs. These early believers, persecuted, half-raced from the city above, became unexpected guardians of something even they feared. For in their buried chambers, lit with flickering lamps and carved crosses, they claimed the artifact had passed into their custody. Imagine it. A small congregation huddled in prayer, the smell of wax and sweat pressing close. Their chants to Christ echo against walls once filled with pagan symbols. Yet over their altars sits something strange, hidden beneath cloth. Not revered, no feared. They believed it to be proof of forces older than Rome, older than even their Hebrew scriptures. Some whispered they were chosen not to wield it, but to keep it from staining the world further. To them, it was not divine relic, but demonic temptation. Some murmured it was the very idol that prophets denounced, or perhaps even a fragment of Babel, the tower of confusion made solid. Others tied it to Revelation's warnings, the stone not cut by human hands that topples kingdoms. If Rome believed its source of legitimacy, they believed it confirmation of apocalypse. Yet here lies the paradox. For even as they cursed it, they could not deny its weight. Reports tell of Christians kneeling near it who suddenly burst into prophecies, speaking not of Caesar, not of Christ precisely, but of visions. Suns extinguished, rivers of blood, cities swallowed in flame. Some treated this as Holy Spirit, others hissed blasphemy. Which was it, divine or diabolic? Was God allowing them to glimpse truth through shadower? Were shadows masquerading as light to unmake their fragile faith? Consider how desperate they must have felt. Persecuted by emperors, hunted, dragged into arenas to die, yet secretly burdened with an object whispered to curse empires. Did they believe it explained Rome's cruelty? That empire's madness was no mere human sin, but the echo of this object breathing into rulers' dreams? Their leaders debated fiercely. Some insisted it should be destroyed, thrown into Tiber fire or shattered by hammer, yet attempts failed. Nothing could scratch its surface. Others argued it must be preserved until Christ returned, proof for generations that evil had always walked parallel to empire. Inscriptions shifting across its face were copied once, then burned before centurions could seize them. Memory whispered only in prayer circles afterward. What would you do in their place? Hidden flock clinging to hope of salvation, burdened with an object that seemed to whisper both damnation and power. Would you guard it, praying it never awakened fully? Or would you cast it into abyss, risking that your rejection might unleash it freer still? A curious legend grew, that in moments of persecution, when soldiers descended on catacombs, the artifact itself would glow, and torches of the intruders would extinguish. This gave Christians moments to scatter, lives saved through terror of the object rather than swords of men. Did this mean it served them? Or did it simply play with life and death indifferently, savoring chaos under guise of miracle? In later centuries, scraps of testimony suggest certain bishops quietly acknowledged its existence, but commanded silence. They feared that belief in such a relic might fracture faith itself, that some would treat it as idol, others as satanic proof, all distracting from Christ's message. So it was sealed, wrapped deeper into corridors, guarded by prayer and secrecy. Imagine walking in those catacombs, now feeling close walls, pressing as a whisper runs through your ear, though none of your companions spoke. Cross carvings and fish symbols glow faint under lamplight. Somewhere ahead rests not only bodies of martyrs, but an artifact that promised both empire's fall and faith's temptation. And the question that remained clung to those worshippers as to us: were Christians its accidental custodians, preserving it until end of days, or were they only unwitting pawns, continuing the cycle of men who carried what none were ever meant to bear? Rome burned with fear and wealth equally when Alaric and his Gothic host descended in 410. Imagine standing in streets that had never fallen before, hearing screams echo between columns, hearing iron shatter marble doors, hearing for the first time in 8 centuries that the eternal city was not eternal after all. Looters swarmed temples. Gold was stolen. Women dragged into darkness. Fires painted skies red. Yet beneath the terror, one rumor wound tighter than chains. Alaric's warriors had not come for conquest alone. They had come for the artifact. Picture cloaked figures moving with precision as the Goths poured through the gates. They did not linger in markets or palaces, but hurried along hidden paths shown to them by frightened Roman defectors. Downward, past crumbled aqueduct vaults, into tunnels. Men carried boxes wrapped in animal skins, guarded more viciously than sacks of plunder. Soldiers nearby whispered it was not gold, but something heavier, something that pulsed. Did the Goths know of it? Or had their sudden march upon Rome been guided by whispers, perhaps even drawn like moths to a flame across centuries, called by the artifact itself? Bishops tried desperately to negotiate safety for Christian shrines. Some accounts say they pleaded not for relics of saints, but for the stone, fearing the Goths had already learned of it. One scribe records in hurried script, "They did not ask for captives, they asked where the shining thing is hidden. They claim it has wandered since Troy, and they will not leave without it." Alaric was no scholar, no senator steeped in myth, yet conquerors still dream, still crave legitimacy. Imagine him, crowned by victory in Rome, staring down at an object older than empires, believing it would anoint his reign. Did he seek to wield Rome's own cursed inheritance as weapon against it? But accounts diverge. Some say the Goths seized it, carrying it north across Alps into shadowed forests, where it was lost deliberately or hidden in shrines, swallowed by war. Others claim Alaric did indeed obtain it, but that when he died suddenly, weeks later, buried in a riverbed beneath diverted waters, the artifact was interred beside him, claimed by earth yet again. Still another tale insists the Christians, desperate yet cunning, deceive the invaders with imitations while smuggling the true relic further into catacombs, assuring its cycle of hiding continued. Which is truer? Rome never agreed. Later chroniclers, embarrassed, preferred to chalk rumors as allegory, fearing to admit sacred ground had let slip something beyond their reach. Yet common people never doubted. To them, the sack of Rome was not mere barbarian triumph, it was the artifact hungering again, luring chaos as it had lured plague, as it had lured madness, and now as it lured foreign armies to desecrate the city itself. In villages across Italy, peasants sang of Alaric, not as king, but as thief cursed for stealing God's fire. Some claimed lightning struck his men as they carried it, flashes burning roads behind them. Others swore the earth itself opened, swallowing wagons until their screams were silenced beneath ground. Always, destruction hung in tandem with its movement. Ask yourself, was the sack of Rome simply collapse of empire under weight of hubris, or was it Rome's cursed inheritance finally demanding payment? Would Rome have endured longer had the artifact never whispered in emperors' ears, never sown discord, never dragged gods through streets disguised as men? In the centuries following, memory blurred, but suspicion never died. The fall was too perfect, too cruel, to be blamed only on barbarians. The shadow of one object slipped silently beneath the official histories, cropping up like a wound that refused scar tissue. Rome fell, yes, but perhaps it was not Goths, nor hunger nor corruption, that felled her first. Perhaps it was a whisper, older than them all, and the question remained, echoing across ruins and ravaged temples, when Alaric carried Rome's treasures north. Did he also carry her destiny inside a box, or was Rome itself merely the artifact's most famous and ultimately failed custodian? As Rome crumbled into fragments and Europe staggered through centuries of shadows, the artifact did not vanish entirely, it became memory. Memory, but memory too potent to be silenced, scattered like sparks across manuscripts, hymns, and whispers. In medieval abbeys, monks bent over parchment by candlelight, quills scratching in unsteady rhythm, copying sacred texts. And yet in margins, in coded initials, in lines deliberately misshapen, they left traces not of Christ, nor of saints, but of something older. A spiral glyph appeared in psalters, with no explanation, curling between letters of psalms. Chroniclers annotated miracles with imagery of cubes that turned into flames. One scriptorium housed a codex where a monk had begun a treatise on Rome's fall, but abruptly replaced Latin with an alphabet unknown, jagged spirals and broken curves. The page was left unfinished, the monk's final entry muttering, "Non scribetur, it cannot be written." Church councils learned of such things and swiftly condemned them. Too many coincidences tied these fragments to dangerous heresy. Some argued the devil planted these symbols. Others suspected the relic itself seeped through pens, twisting words without consent. So the order came. Any mention of the mysterious stone, any foreign script resembling its inscriptions, must be burned. Entire manuscripts disappeared into hearthglow. Scribes vanished quietly. Yet suppression never succeeded fully. Truth always leaks through cracks. Among pilgrims, rumor took a different shape. They spoke of a relic guarded by monks in hidden monasteries, not a shroud, but a stone glowing faint when moonlight struck. These pilgrims whispered that it cursed abbots with visions, showing them Rome's fall repeatedly until their minds broke. A few orders treated it as holy, proof of divine chastisement. Others as monstrous, chaining it in underground vaults away from prayer halls. Knights carried the story too. Crusaders returning from the east swore they had seen inscriptions identical to Roman fragments carved into Babylonian ruins, proof the monks who feared to write truth hadn't fabricated anything. Some crusaders believed they carried part of the artifact's secret back with them, hidden in reliquaries disguised as saintly bones. Did the Templars, those infamous keepers of mystery perhaps, stumble upon it, recognizing in its shifting forms the very essence of forbidden knowledge. The medieval mind could never let go of relics. Faith thrived on them: bones, shrouds, splinters of the cross. But this one relic seemed to resist incorporation. No bishop anointed it, no cathedral enshrined it. It survived in the margins, in errors and rumors, like a ghost pruning memory itself. Perhaps that is more terrifying, to be remembered only half, denied officially yet believed unshakably in back rooms where ink dried under candlelight. Imagine a monk writing late at night, his candle guttering. He copies Augustine's words about the city of God. While in the silence he hears scratching not of his quill but across the wall. Glancing up, he sees the spiral already forming on stone, traced in faint red glow. Shaken, he keeps writing, but his Latin slips, shifting letter by letter into curves he does not know, until he collapses asleep. In morning, brothers find the page nonsense, they say, though his eyes remain open, fixed on some vision unseen. How many such monks carried memory of Rome's forbidden possession without even knowing what possessed them? The Middle Ages, with their fear of devils and their hunger for signs, became fertile ground for its shadow. Yet church authority ensured the story never reached daylight. Scraps survived only in rumor, passed into folk tales of a stone that glowed with voices, a relic said to curse any king who sought to hold it. In France, peasants told of a knight who bore a cube that shimmered and was struck dead in battle, though none touched him. Minstrels sang of a mere rock of Rome that made two brothers slay each other for its light. Always the echo returned, fragmented, distorted, coated in legend. Ask yourself, what is worse? To lose an artifact entirely, or to half remember it, unable to confirm truth, yet unable to dismiss? Mystery and silence is potent. It shapes centuries from beneath ash. And so, through centuries of quills and cloisters, the artifact lingered only a splintered tale. Burned manuscripts, forbidden runes, relics disguised. No single record survived whole, and that was deliberate. What escaped was only the unease itself, and the question that remained smoldered alongside forgotten script. Did the monks protect humanity from its memory, or did their censorship only give the artifact new life, spreading as legend, stronger in silence than it ever was in Rome? Centuries turn, empires shift, but Rome still breathes beneath its ruins. Standing today among shattered columns and cobbled streets, you feel the weight of time pressing down, yet hear faintly as if under layers of dust, a whisper that never ceased. For even now, fragments surface, refusing to let the tale die. The artifact, though hidden for ages, leaves echoes in archaeologists' hands. In stray inscriptions uncovered beneath forums, in coincidences too precise to dismiss. Excavations in the 19th century turned up tablets misfiled among temple debris. To most scholars, they seemed ordinary, broken prayers, half-complete building records. But hidden in margins were the spirals again, curling precisely as Roman priests once described, identical to Mycenaean marks seen earlier in Greece. A recurring rune across cultures, across centuries, across gods. Coincidence? Skeptics snorted. Yet the symbol repeated again in medieval manuscripts painted inside a church fresco where no Roman hand had guided the brush. Then there are the modern accounts. One Italian excavator in 1923 reported stone blocks beneath the Colosseum that hummed faintly under torch flame. He swore his compass spun without pause when lowered into shadows. His crew mocked him until they, too, heard whispers threading through arches at night. Rumor says he sealed his notes, fled to Florence, and never returned. The papers vanished in wartime chaos, but stories passed among locals linger still. More unsettling are the synchronicities. Photographers capturing ruins along Palatine. They'll discover strange street screen light bending in patterns too coherent for accident. Tourists faint, muttering names they never knew. A professor translating obscure Etruscan shards reports phrases shifting each morning into slightly different Latin, as though still alive even on fragment. Scholars dismiss it all as error, superstition, projection, but inside the dismissal remains a pulse of unease. Would you walk among those ruins yourself? Past the Senate's shells, into catacomb mouths, where perhaps beneath your very feet something lost still slumbers? What would you do if standing in underground passage you hear again that hum low, timeless, vibrating your bone marrow, promising both knowledge and undoing? Rome today markets itself as eternal souvenirs, statues, history for cameras. Yet eternity is seldom clean. The artifact may still lie buried beneath stones no tourist could recognize, pass between hands invisible, whispering into centuries. Perhaps it no longer needs to be touched. Perhaps it seeps upward through cracks, embedding itself not in shrines, but in dreams. How else to explain the repeating spiral etched unconsciously in notebooks of children? How else to account for voices of tourists claiming they heard Latin in the wind, though no guides spoke nearby? If the artifact lives still, unseen, then Rome has never been free of it. The empire may have fallen, but perhaps destiny has not. Perhaps the object continues to tempt, to whisper, to surface, when humanity grows bold enough to reach again. A cycle not broken, only paused. And you hearing this, feeling the echo across your chest can, you truly say it is gone. Or is that very certainty the mistake Rome made, century after century, until ruins proved their arrogance? The silence beneath the stones is not empty silence. It is waiting. The question that remains now stretches to our own age. Has the artifact been buried forever under Rome? Its hunger sealed in stone ore? Does it still breathe beneath the eternal city, choosing the right dreamer to awaken once more? And now, let us set the torches down. Let the noise of empire fade. Let the vibrations of streets and clamors of gods soften into distance. We have walked through centuries together, through catacombs and temples, through plague and prophecy, and in every step lurked a hum just beyond reach. But endings must come gently. The artifact, whether true or imagined, serves as mirror. It shows us how humanity longs for certainty, how rulers hunger for sanction, how mortals dress fear in sacred words. Close your eyes and feel the hush of Rome at night. The ruins no longer echo with senators or generals, only with soft footsteps of wanderers tracing stones that once shook with thunder. Statues above crack, but below the earth stays restless, always shifting, always breathing. And whether or not an artifact still lies hidden, the truth is this: history itself is artifact. Every word we inherit, every silence we guard, every myth we pass on, these are stones humming in our own hands, shaping empires of memory. So breathe deeply now. Let go of the weight of spirals and curses, of whispered gods and starved lines of text. Imagine Rome not in flames, not in thunder, but beneath starlight. Its marble columns silvered by moon, its streets empty, its catacombs asleep. The voices fade, the inscriptions calm, the stone returns to silence. What remains is only your heartbeat, steady and human, always reminding you that some relics belong not in our hands, but in dreams. And gently, softly, we close the tale.